Good afternoon. Hi. So I'm going to ask you a question and just be honest rather than polite. How many of you thought that today so far has been a good investment of your time? Raise your hand. Okay, well, wow, it's amazing. Who thought it was more than you expected, better than expected? Okay, quite a lot. Who wants to say why? This is where people go quiet. Okay, you all raised your hand. You said it was more than you expected. I'm just interested in why.
Informative, friendly.
Which you didn't expect it to be. Oh, more informative and more friendly than you expected it to be. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
It was very well organized.
Well organized, that's important. So paying attention to the small details. Yeah, great. Nice that you appreciate that.
The opportunity to express the need to cut the average age of ESRA members by going active to recruit IDF members.
Thank you. What is the average age of ESRA members?
You don't want to know. We don't want to know.
So let's see if I can help you make that happen. So when Maddie asked me to come and speak to you about 6 months ago, I didn't hesitate and I said yes. And I'm particularly happy to be here. I've been a keynote speaker in different places, recently in Budapest for Google, 100 senior executives from the media buying solutions. And this is a little bit more exciting for me. Also, because I have my mother and father, Herzl and Lola, and my sister Sharon, who works with my father, who gave her the day off to come and and also because you guys are doing great things, and I'd like to see how I can lend what I know to help you move forward and to develop your leadership. So the first thing I want to direct your attention to, I want to ask you this question. Right now, what are you thinking? So I want you just to direct your thought to what you are thinking, and what I'm about to show you is really deep and profound. What did I just do by telling you it's going to be deep and profound? Yeah, it's called priming, and you can prime people. And I'd like you to be more attentive in how you can be more persuasive, how you can influence people. And one way is priming. I'll give you an example. If I say to you the good news is, everything I say after that will be perceived as good news. So even if you work with companies and they have to default on a promise, and let's say they found a bug in a technical product, they'll say, the good news is we found it on time. The good news is we know how to fix it. So just by saying the good news is, you are priming people. If you say this is important, you're priming people. So if I say to you, here's a funny story, I've primed you to laugh before I've even told you anything. So this is important and it's deep, because what you think is your mindset. So first of all, what are you thinking about yourself in this context? Do you think you overworked and underappreciated? Do you think people recognize you for what the contribution that you're making? So it's your thinking about yourself, that mindset. It's how you perceive others, how you perceive me on this stage right now. What are you thinking about me? I don't know what it is, but whatever you're thinking, you're correct. Because, you know, there's the sticker that says, my mind's made up, please do not confuse me with the facts. Yeah. Do you know people like that? Yeah. They've made up their mind about what ESRA can and can't do, and now don't confuse me with the facts. So many lectures in creativity and innovation, and what you've been trying to do here all day is to think outside of the box. But how about this? How about you try this thought on and see if it sits well with you? What if there is no box? So rather than thinking out of the box, just think there is no box. What can happen if you start thinking there is no box? So a lot of what I do is I try and direct what people think about themselves, how they perceive others, and how they perceive a specific context that they are in. My objective today is for you to walk out of here thinking differently. And I was once challenged by someone, I was giving a workshop, and they said, how do you measure your success? And I said, if you walk out of that door and you think exactly the way you thought, when you walked in the door, I have failed and you have wasted a day. But do you have the courage to think differently? So if you think differently, look what happens. If you think differently, you will see things differently. I suggest to you that you don't see ESRA as it is, you don't see the volunteers or leadership as it is, you see it as you think it is. So I like to say a positive person lives in a positive world, and a negative person lives in a negative world. It's what you see. You think you can, you think you can't, you're right. What are you seeing? So I want to tell you a quote that I've heard, tell you if you can relate to it. It sits well with my personal life. Here's the quote. I've been through some terrible things in my life. Some of them actually happened. So what happens a lot of the time is we borrow trouble from the future, which means things haven't actually happened yet, and yet we visualize it and we imagine it. So whether it has or hasn't happened in reality, you can actually have a visual of it. And then what we see is how we feel. So they say, if you see things in a good way, that's how you will feel. And if you feel in a negative way, that's how you feel. And your feelings are contagious. So a positive person would spread that around, and a negative person would spread that around. And I like to say that misery loves company. So a miserable person will seek the company of other equally miserable people, and they can all have a wonderfully miserable time together. But one thing a miserable person will not stand is a positive person. They'll say, no, you don't understand. Things are bad. The economy, it's bad. Politics, it's bad. And that's the way they see it, and they want other people to feel the same way. What we feel is what we do. So emotions follow emotions. So a lot of the decisions we make are emotion-based. Dan Ariely has written quite a few books on how people make decisions that aren't logical. One of my favorite quotes is, the heart has reasons that reason knows nothing of. And sometimes it's hard to rationalize why we feel. So if someone says, I love you, and you ask, why? Why do you love me? I'm not sure they can answer that question for you, but it doesn't mean that they don't feel that love. So what's at the bottom of this over here? So what you do affects what you get. How did Einstein define insanity? Repeating the same behavior and expecting a different result. If you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you got. If you want to get something different, you need to do something different. But I suggest to you that to do something different, you first need to think something different. So if you're trying to get younger people into ESRA, if you're trying to get more people involved, if you want to raise more money, and what you've done so far isn't working, then you need to stop and you need to think different so that you can get something different. So what you want to do is you want to connect with people on a cognitive level, so you want to connect with them intellectually, but you also want to connect with them emotionally. And then you want them to do something. So I call this the triple H. So here it's your head, your heart, and your hand. They have to work together, because if you aren't synchronized, if what you think and what you feel is not consistent with what you do, it's not going to fly, it's not going to work well. So if you want people to do something, if you want people to join ESRA, if you want people to come on your activities or to donate money, that's what you want them to do. You first need to understand, what do they need to feel before they do this, and what do they need to think before they do this. Now, I'm actually preaching to the choir, right? Because all the people here, you know why you're here. You are people who are going out of your way, you're donating your time, talent, and energy to make a difference. So you think that it's actually obvious that everyone else will want to do the same thing. In Hebrew we say zeba'o, that volunteering and giving, obviously this is something we need to do. But how's this? What I'm suggesting to you is that, breaking news, people don't think the way you think. And the biggest mistake you can make is to think that what motivates you to volunteer will necessarily motivate other people to volunteer, because that's simply not true. My grandmother, some of you might have known her, Cecilia Crane, and I learned a lot from her, and I talk about her in our workshops. And she used to say to me, Lovey, that's how she would call me when she was in a good mood. She would say, Lovey, in this life you have to think like a fish. Isn't that deep? You have to understand the full sentence. When you go fishing, think like a fish, not like a fisherman. So again, I just primed you. Don't know if you noticed. It's deep. So think like a fish, not like a fisherman means you need to use as bait what the fish likes to eat, not what you like to eat. So if you want to motivate people, don't get them to do it for what reasons you think are the right reasons. You have to get them to do it for reasons they think. So what I'm going to talk to you about, my objective is to help you make a difference, to take ESRA to the next level, and I would like it to be very practical. So first of all, I hope you noticed I'm not using any slides. I sincerely hope that makes you happy. I was once at Keynote and someone asked me for my slide deck, the organizer, and I said I had no slides, and I always love to watch people's reactions when I say no slides. It's always a bit of a surprise, and he said, oh, no slides, and I said, nope. And then he kind of sighed, more to himself than to me, and he said, well, maybe that's a good thing, he said. All the speakers before you with PowerPoint had no power and had no point. So, something else I'd like to say to you is that this isn't really a lecture, so I've come to chat with you. It's an interactive discussion, so I'm going to give you some exercises which you can or cannot partake in, it's up to you. And if at any time you have a question, you can raise your hand. And yes, Dad, that includes you. So feel free to ask me a question whenever you have one. This should be an interactive discussion rather than a frontal lecture. One of the things that I'd like you first to remember, and this is something that I teach in all my workshops. I founded my company in 2001. I employed 15 people. Someone asked me once to define what it is I do in 3 words, which is an interesting challenge. So I thought about it, and these are the 3 words I came up with. Communication, relationship, results. 3 words, that's what I do. So what I focus on is helping people communicate better. When people communicate better, they will have better relationships. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if it's a professional or personal relationship, because I did a workshop in New York, and one lady came up after the full 2 days, and she said to me, I only have one regret. And I said, what is that? And she said that I couldn't bring my entire family to this workshop. And it surprised me, because all we were talking about was business relationships, but it's exactly the same processes, whether it's a business or personal relationships. It's the same processes and the same practices, because if you're looking at building trust, for instance, if you're looking at influence without authority, these are the same principles. And one of the first things I like to say is this, and if you have a pen and paper, maybe you want to write it down, W-I-I-F-M, and if you've written it down, please underline it twice, and if you've underlined it, please circle it. This is my way of saying to you, this is really seriously super important. Does anybody know what WFM stands for? Okay, so what's in it? For me, in Hebrew, ani mayotzeli. And mayotzeli means that. So you need to understand that people are self-serving. Don't look at me, it's not my fault. That's the way it was when I arrived. People are self-serving. So if you understand that if you want to motivate people, you have to discover what's important to them, what are their priorities. And then all you need to do is show them how what you are asking of them is consistent with their priorities. So the WFM is what's in it for me. And your job in influencing and persuading people to do what you want them to do and think what you want them to think and feel what you want them to think is to create relevant value. So relevant value means for them, some people have this approach, me first. If you're thinking me first, if you are self-orientated, if you're working in a silo, then it's not going to go a long way to encourage people to join you. In fact, someone who's very self-orientated doesn't inspire trust. So what you really want to do is you want to discover what other people value. I call it a we first, or sometimes you first. But if your whole mindset is me first, you're not going to get a lot of people to join you. So even your language should be we, our, together, and not me, 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 me. So that's the first thing, what's in it for me. One of the ways I start a workshop often is I say, I've got something you want, come and get it. It's how I open a workshop. And people sit back. And I say, I have something you want. It can be budget, it can be time, it can be connections. How can you make me give you something I have and you want? Sometimes they try to argue with me, what is it? And I say, never mind what it is, you want it. What do you think the responses I get from the group are? What would people say? How would you get me to give you something I have and you want?
Ask for it.
So people ask for it, and they even ask politely, and they say, pretty please. No.
Flattery.
Flattering, okay. That will get you everywhere, right? It depends. Sometimes. But if people feel that you are sucking up to them, then it's going to backfire. Not only won't give it to you, they'll actually feel it antagonizes people when you're trying to butter me up, or what the Americans call kiss ass. That doesn't fly well.
Find out what you want.
You know what I want?
No, find out what you want.
So what are you going to ask me?
What do you
What
want?
what can I give you that you would give me what I want?
Thank you very much. You just got 12 points. But doesn't that just make sense? All you have to do is say, what do I need to do to get you to say yes to me? So if you're meeting people, rather than trying to guess what will make them join ESRA, why not just ask them, what do we need to do to get you to join? And they will tell you, or they may not know, but then offer some alternatives. Would this work? How about that? Ask them. You simply cannot assume what people value. You have to discover what people value. It might be very different to your values. Just ask. I call it the power of questioning and the power of curiosity. So just show interest in other people. Find out what they need to get in order to give what you want them to give. So then my answer is this. I say, I have a little fetish, I confess. And my fetish is I really love to see people write their names on the whiteboard. And then again, there's a stunned silence. And one person said, oh, anyone can do that, but no one does. Until some person gets up and writes the name on the board. Whatever color they choose to write their name in, I say, but that's not my favorite color. So now, they don't want to be a friar. You know that concept? There isn't one word in English, but not exactly a succub. There's no, my mother will tell you this better than I can, but there's no word for friar in English just because you don't need that word. No one's walking around feeling like a friar. So some people actually sit down once they've got up, they've written their name, I ask just write in a different color and they sit down. Another person sometimes would write their name and they get a big box of chocolates. So I actually do give them something. But it's funny for me that some people would actually argue, or they're this close to the candy bar and then they'll just sit down because they think I'm making a fool of them. What they could have said is, before they get up, what color would you like me to write my name in? My full name or my first name, in caps or lowercase? And if I do this for you, then will you give me the candy bar? And this is such a simple, simple way of influencing people. If I do that for you, then will you do this for me? And you want to get commitment. So one of the key elements in persuading and influencing people is the law of reciprocity. You know who works like that? The mafia. So the mafia does that and they say there's no free lunch. So I'll do you a favor, but now you owe me. Did you ever get a free dessert in a restaurant? Okay, so if you're skeptic, you're thinking, oh, it's a mistake in the kitchen, they didn't want to throw it out, they gave it to us. If you're less skeptic, you'll think, wow, that was a really nice thing of them to do for us. But then how many of you would factor that free dessert into the tip that you leave? So that free dessert comes just before you ask for the bill. They won't give you a free soup or salad, it's a free dessert. Because it comes just before you ask for the check. It's the law of reciprocity. Can you think of any other examples where you experience the law of reciprocity? Think of how people get you to do something because they've done something for you. Any example? How many of you invite friends for dinner just because they invited you for dinner? And think, oh, we have to reciprocate. Okay, so that's something that you're familiar with. So if I want you to invite me to your home, all I have to do is invite you to mine. So it's give what you want to get. So a lot of the time, if you want to get information, give information. If you want to get someone's attention, give attention. In fact, I would say this to you, don't try to be the most interesting person in the room. Rather be the most interested. Look around you, there's so many interesting people in this room. It's a tough competition. So rather than you trying to be the most interesting, why don't you be the most interested, which will probably make you the most interesting. Because interested becomes interesting. So if you just show attention to other people, they will reciprocate by showing attention to you. I want to give you 3 rules of reciprocity. First of all, give first. Don't give in return, because then they're initiating. It's like teenagers when the girl says to the boy, I love you, and then he replies, I love you too, and then she says, that doesn't count, I said it first. So give first. Give when it's not expected. If you are giving something that people expect to get, it doesn't work. You don't expect a free dessert. And what you give has to be in kind for what you're asking for. So I can't give you something small and then ask for you to reciprocate with something much bigger. It has to be in kind, tit for tat. So if you do that and it's done personally, people will feel indebted to you. And sometimes people deliberately do that. They want to create a situation whereby you feel indebted to them by them giving something to you. And sometimes it's small things that they do that make you feel committed to them. So are there any questions on reciprocity? Okay, so that's one thing that you can do to get people in, is to give them something for them. The second rule is the rule of likability. We are more partial to be influenced by people that we like. So if a friend recommends a restaurant or a friend recommends a movie, and I want to just prove that to you with a short exercise, I'm going to ask you to turn to someone in the audience that you don't really know. It works best if you don't know that person. So you probably know the person sitting next to you, but reach out to the person behind you or the person on the other side. I just need you to be in teams of 2. So just please locate someone that you don't know. Okay, so do you know they actually proved in a laboratory that you can get people to fall in love with you? So you can Google it. There are 36 questions that if you ask each other, they take a single male and a single woman and they go through this 36 questioning process, they will be in love, so it's scientific. I'm not going to ask you to try and fall in love with each other. And we're not going to go through 36 questions, but I am going to prime you. So now that you found a partner, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do a little exercise. So one of the best things about coming to this event is meeting other people. And some of you come from different regions, different parts of Israel. Who's here from the north? Raise your hand, people who came from the north. Wow, kol hakavod, okay. For me that's really far, because I live in Tel Aviv, and everything beyond the Yarkon is really far. So, how many of you come from the south? Okay, also far, good. So, welcome. Herzliya is fine, Herzliya is close enough. Yeah, Herzliya is good, that's center. Okay. Benoni. Who else is from Benoni? Just you, Dad. You know what they say, you can take the boy out of Benoni, but you can't take Benoni out of the boy, right? Okay. But Benoni's in South Africa. So that's, you know, it's interesting because when I travel, and people say, where are you from? I always say Tel Aviv, I never say Israel. First of all, Tel Aviv enjoys a better global reputation than does Israel. Secondly, much to my surprise, many people don't know that Tel Aviv is in Israel. So, yeah. Okay, so this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you just to get to know each other a little bit, and I'm going to give you a little acronym to do this. FORM. You know, sometimes I interview people, and one of the first questions you ask in an interview is, so, tell me about yourself. And I'm amazed at how many people are floored by this question, as if no one has ever asked them that question before. I get answers like, oh, so what do you want to know? Or where should I begin? You have to have an intelligent answer for that question, so tell me about yourself. And here is a format. It's 4 buckets that you can use either to share information about yourself or to learn about someone new. And I like to say, keep private information private, but don't worry about sharing personal information. So it's a way people get to know you. So F is family. Anything to do with family. So in some cultures you can't ask, are you married, do you have kids? But you can say, tell me about your family, brothers and sisters. It's a way of just connecting, and once you find that you have similar family backgrounds, it gives you a common ground to talk to. So it's a way of showing interest in other people, family. O is occupation and career. So what are you doing? What did you do? What are you looking forward to doing? It's what you studied. People have very interesting career paths. What we're finding now in a lot of high-tech companies is something called diversity and inclusion. So they're actually trying to get a very diverse background of people. Google employed someone who I spoke to who before used to manage a beer brewery. So he didn't even come from the world of internet and digital. So it just goes to show that people have different backgrounds. Occupation has got to do with career, studies. R is recreation. People love talking about their holidays, their plans. If there are any foodies in the house tonight, some people love to talk about food, wine. It can be sport, it can be music, it can be your book club, it can be the hiking club. And I understand that the buses are full when you go on your hiking club. And I understand that the cinema club is sold out. So you guys are doing good things, and there's a lot of things that you can talk about that you have in common. So R is recreation, anything people like to do with their spare time. M has got to do with motivation, and these are interesting discussions. Motivation can also speak to passion, it can go to inspiration, who and what inspires you, how are you motivated. These are interesting discussions to have even with people you already know. Sometimes when I'm overseas I ask people, where is your church? And I don't mean that in a religious context, but your church or your mosque or your synagogue is anywhere where you feel that you belong, anywhere where you feel connected and meaningful, anywhere you go to recharge. So if I had to ask you, where is your church? Where do you go to reconnect? Where do you feel meaningful and connected and inspired? So these are interesting discussions. You don't have to follow it in this order, and you don't have to cover all of these subjects. But family, occupation, recreation, motivation, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, preferably with someone that you don't know, to try and learn something new about them. Now, I'll just say this to you. If you are the person who usually is quiet in these conversations and you prefer just to listen, I'm going to ask you to speak up. If you're the person who tends to talk all the time, I'm going to ask you to shut up. So whatever it is, it's your responsibility to make sure that you don't do all the talking and that you don't do all the answering. So one way perhaps is just to answer a question and then to reciprocate with the same question. So this needs to be a conversation between 2 people. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Was my explanation clear enough? Okay, go. If you use words consciously, words have power, words have energy, and some people even say words have a taste. So some words just taste sweet. So I agree and I also. If I'm in a workshop and someone disagrees with me or they push back, I often just like to say, you are right. And there's this, a reaction. I say, how do you feel now? And usually they feel good, because even if you're 98% right, give the other person a 2%, maybe they're right as well. So everyone is right partially. So there is no one absolute truth. So that's just another thought. So go back to this person and try and find as many things you have in common, but please try and use words like I agree and I also. 2 minutes. Now, I want to make you, this is the last part of the exercise, and I want to make you a little bit more comfortably uncomfortable. So what I'm going to ask you to do in just a few minutes is I'm going to ask you to say something kind to the person you just spoke to. I'm going to ask you to think of something nice, a genuine compliment that you can give the person you just spoke to. And if what's going through your mind right now is, oh my God, I've got nothing nice to say, I'm going to talk for a few more minutes just to give you time to think of something nice to say. Okay. So it could relate to the content. Use words like, what I appreciate about you is, or what I like about you is. But use words like, I appreciate, like, and acknowledge. Everywhere in the world, people are walking around with an invisible sign on their forehead that says, make me feel special. So if you can do that, I want to introduce you to the WFM's big sister. So, do you remember what WFM is? Well done, class. Okay, now, the WFM has a big sister. MMFG.AM, and that just means make me feel good about myself. Isn't that a great thing that you can do for other people? Just make other people feel good about themselves by giving a genuine compliment. It could just be, you've got a beautiful smile. Or I felt as if I could talk to you about anything. So it's a genuine compliment I'd like you to give that person. Now just a few things about how to accept a compliment.
Come on, switch it off.
Okay, that's an awkward moment, right? And everyone's looking at you because you're following. So when you get a compliment, Israelis have this kind of mindset, Dai tamshich. Dai, it's awkward, uncomfortable, tamshich, tell me more. So it's really a nice way just to acknowledge a compliment just by saying thank you. Or just by saying, I had no idea you noticed that, or I had no idea that you appreciated that. So it's a nice way of just acknowledging a compliment. Thank you for noticing is a nice way of acknowledging a compliment. But don't make the other person feel bad by giving you a compliment. So some people, if you're a hostess and they say, wow, it was a great lasagna, and the hostess says, and the soup? How was the soup? It's really important to learn how to acknowledge a compliment. So now, it really has to be genuine. If it's not genuine, it's not going to fly. The other person might have something that you appreciate and acknowledge that they might be completely unaware of, and by you acknowledging it, it helps them understand that they have something worth acknowledging. So please do that now. It's the last exercise. Just give and receive an honest, genuine compliment. Person you just spoke to. Who can say no? done is I've just primed you to like the job. I'm going to tell you how I do that and how you can keep doing that. First of all, how many of you heard a compliment that surprised you or that you didn't think that people noticed about you? How many of you heard something you didn't expect to hear? Okay, there you go. The people who raised their hand, do you believe the person who told you that? Good. Because there really is...
Put my hand up.
Okay, been married for 60 years. 53 years. And you learned new things. So, you know, it reminds me of a story. You can sing about them. Do you want to sing about them? No. It reminds me of a woman who phones her husband and says, I want to go on a blind date. And the husband says, why? With who? And she says, with you. And he said, I don't understand. We've been married for 15 years. What do you mean? And she read about it in a book, or she saw it in a movie, and said, look, this is the thing. You have to call me at work and invite me on a date. And if I like you, then I'll say yes. But the rule is that we can't talk about anything that suggests that we know each other previously. It really has to be as if we're meeting each other for the very first time. So after 15 years, not 53 years, they went out on this date, and then the man said some incredible things happened in that date. First of all, he said he finally understood what his wife does at work. The next thing, he said, he fell in love with the woman he's already in love with. He said, if this would have been the first date, I still would have asked her to marry me. And so sometimes, you know, the more we know people, the less we look at them. So it's a good idea to look twice, and how they say charity begins at home. My father once said to me that he would rather be my client than my father. He felt that I was giving more attention to my customers than I was to my own family and parents, and that really made me think, and that's why they say charity begins at home. You know how sometimes in South Africa women go out, you know, they volunteer, Meals on Wheels, but their own family don't have food on the table, not because they can't afford it, but because mom's out saving the world. So just the idea of looking at people you already know, and sometimes I've just had this discussion with friends I've known for many years, particularly the motivation, inspiration discussions have been really, really interesting. So take this out, you might be surprised. People change. Look at someone you've known all your life, or most of your life, as if you're meeting them for the very first time. Who knows? Amazing things can happen. Most of them good. So what I did was, here, I want to just break it down into likability. How can you prime likability? So, number one, I call it FaceTime. If you want people to like you, you need to invest the time. It can't be done via text messages or emails. You have to literally spend what I call FaceTime. It's not just an application on iOS. You have to spend FaceTime, number one. Number two is open up, share something about yourself and show interest in them. Sometimes vulnerability creates intimacy, and intimacy breeds trust. So a lot of the time, if you've seen TED Talks, there's a TED Talk by Brené Brown who talks about the power of vulnerability. So again, I'm just saying, keep private information private, share personal information. If you open up, if you lower those guards and invite people in, they would usually, reciprocity will work. So number one is FaceTime. Number two is share something about yourself and show an interest in other people. Number three, use words like I also and I agree with, because we like people who agree with us. Birds of a feather flock together, etc. So see what you can agree with someone. Even when what you see is where you are different, look for what you have in common. And lastly, and lastly is give it thank you. Is just to give a genuine compliment. Find something good to say. We are quick to criticize. We are quick to find fault. But I know that my father still thanks my mother for every meal that she cooks for him, and he never takes that for granted. So it's just these little things, it's really just little things, and we take so much for granted. We call it sometimes an attitude of gratitude. If you just wake up and you realize how much you've got to be grateful for, and how many really amazing people you have in your life. Someone once, a religious Jew, said, but that's part of Judaism. He says, every morning I wake up, before I get out of bed, Modeh ani lefanecha, which is the prayer of gratitude. The first thing you do when you open your eyes in the morning is to give thanks for another day of living. So I think that's a great attitude to have. It also makes you more aware of how truly blessed you are. And it also helps if you just spread that by letting other people know what you appreciate or acknowledge about them. I was once working with an Israeli manager, and he said to me, this is the best team I've ever managed. My first question was, is this the first team you've ever managed? And he said, no, he's managed several. And I said, my second question was, did you tell them? Whenever someone says something nice to you about another person, ask them that question, did you tell them? And he says, no, I didn't tell them. I said, why? He says, they know. Look, the obvious needs to be stated. If you don't show it, how are people going to see it? So don't just assume that people know. You need to say it. It has to be explicit. So that's on likability. So we've discussed consistency, we've discussed likability. Why do you think I've dressed like this? What do you think of my waistcoat? So why did I dress smartly? Because my parents are here. Because an English-speaking audience.
Definitely not. For effect.
But it looks professional. So sometimes when I wear a waistcoat, people say, you must be successful and smart, you're wearing a waistcoat. So I just want you to know that the third thing that I want to talk about that helps us is called authority. This is a kind of a uniform. So we obey people with an authority. So when people introduce me, and on the very complimentary flyer, when they described me as a global, motivational, inspirational. So first of all, why did they say it? Number one, it's true. But number two was to prime you to listen to me. So if you thought I had no idea what I was talking about, if I didn't look like this, if I was 17 years old, how many of you would find that easy to listen to? Sometimes we look at people and say, oh, they're too young or they're too old. So age creates a bias. And sometimes the way you dress, it creates a bias. And that's why people wear uniforms. And that's why some doctors wear white coats. So usually, you know, if you're going to a dietitian, you would like her not to be overweight. And if you have a personal fitness trainer, you'd like him or her to look fit. So you have to look the part. And when it comes to authority, people listen to people who have authority. In fact, sometimes they don't even question people who have authority. And what is interesting, I don't know if you've seen, it was on Channel 4 and also in Israel, it was a program called Pushed to the Edge. Did any of you see that, Pushed to the Edge? It was a social experiment on compliance. They took 4 people and they set up an elaborate social experiment at the end of which they had to push someone off the ledge. It was a human being, right? So they took people with no criminal record. They just took 4 people, they built an elaborate story using authority, and then they got people to actually push a living person over the ledge. They did not know that it was an actor and that the actor had a harness. As far as they're concerned, they pushed someone to their death. And it was an incredible, check it out on YouTube. It's called Pushed to the Edge. It's about 45 minutes and it actually shows how people do it. It begins with a short experiment. So no spoilers, but this is the short experiment. Someone with a very authoritative tone of voice, so it's even your tone of voice, said, this is Detective Sergeant so-and-so from the Scotland Yard. Is there a woman at this age with a pram and a baby? And the person who picks up the phone just works in the restaurant, he's a waiter. So he looks and says, yes, there is. He says, look, this woman stole that baby. I need you to help me get her away from the baby. Give me your cell phone number. And in a very direct tone. So the waiter gives his cell phone number. He says, keep the landline open, which he does. He says, now, go to the lady and tell her there's a phone call. Stay with me on the line. When the woman goes to answer the phone, he says, now, take the pram and leave the restaurant. Exit the restaurant with the baby. And the guy does that. He says, I can't believe I'm doing it. I can't believe I'm doing it. But he does. So it just shows you how people are prone to that. I have a friend, his name is Andrew Charles Gainsford. He looks like what the name sounds like. And Andy has a lot of money. And he's particularly interested in other people's money. Good try. That's something my father would say, actually. Send him to ESRA was the comment. So Andy asks me the most personal questions about my personal finance, how much I pay and how much I invest and how much I earn. And before I have a chance to think, I just find myself answering Andy because his tone of voice is so commanding, I feel compelled to answer him before I say, hang on, it's none of his business. He's British. But when I try to reverse the questions, he doesn't answer me because I just don't have that. I don't think it's any of my business. So if you are very apologetic, if you don't mind, can I, may I? When I say be more word conscious, try and eliminate words like try. I will try to help you. If you watch Star Wars, Yoda says there is no try. Do or do not do, but don't try. Imagine you're flying somewhere and the pilot comes in the PA system and says, I'll try to land in 20 minutes. So that doesn't inspire confidence and trust. So if you have authority, or you get someone with authority to join ESRA, once, people said no one ever lost their job for buying IBM, because if you bought IBM and you crashed, hey, you bought from the best. So sometimes people want to know who's in ESRA. If you get some of the shakers and movers to join, if they're there, if they're doing it, then I'll come as well. So it's learning who to approach and how to approach and understand that people respond to figures of authority. And the very last thing I want to close with is consistency. Consistency is another way of influencing people. We like to feel that we are consistent in what we say and do. So if you get people to commit to something, even if it's something really small. So I'll give you another example. With Google, they're trying to get people to advertise online. So to move budgets away from television to, let's say, YouTube. A lot of people don't want to invest on the internet because they just feel comfortable investing where they regularly. People resist change. So when they're trying to say, give me your budget, people refuse. But when you say, let's have a pilot, let's just try one project, it makes it easy for people to say yes, also known as a foot in the door. So people might not want to commit a lot of money or a lot of time, but if you just start with something small, and they say yes to that small thing, and then you ask them something else which is consistent with the first yes, the chances are you'll get a third yes. So sometimes I donate money, also to ESRA, and people say, they call me up and say, this is the 9th year, it's the 9th consecutive year that you've donated money. So what, am I going to say no after I said yes 9 times? So if you can show people how what you are asking them to do is consistent with what you asked them to do before, and you start with small little things, you now get them involved. So one of these techniques that we use in some of our customers, you're walking past a corridor and someone stops and says, hey, would you mind just taking a look at this quickly? Tell me what you think. By the way, people love to give you their opinions, particularly taxi drivers, anyone like that. You just ask them, what do you think about? So now they stop and they give you their opinion. 2 weeks later, they found themselves owning that task. And they think, how did that happen? I was just walking past the corridor. So sometimes people stop me in the street and they say, we got a petition for this right cause, would you sign? No, we just need a signature. I thought, well, it's a good cause, it's a little thing, sure, I'll sign the petition. now that you've signed, would you like to make a donation? Because now that you've signed and you've agreed it's a worthy cause, now they want you to make a donation. So these are the principles that really, really, it happened to you?
No, it's her.
So these are some of the tricks that people use to try and get you to comply and to influence. Thank you. What was your question?
Do you have a TED Talk?
Do I have a TED Talk? No, but I've coached a lot of TED speakers, and I encourage you to watch TED Talks. And there's some really brilliant TED Talks. The one I recommend, again, Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability is great. Why Schools Kill Creativity is another good TED Talk to watch. And there's one by Amy Cuddy that says what your body language says about you. So she says, fake it until you become it, not fake it until you make it. But fake it until you become it. So how you use body language to communicate authority and confidence and trust. I'd like to close with a short story, and this is again a story of my grandmother. She met Aliyah after the age of 90, and I was very close to her. And we once went to see a sunset on Chofatzuk in Herzliya. So we were standing there as the sun was setting into the Mediterranean. And I always like telling the story because it reminds me as I remind you. And she said to me, you know, it's good to be alive. And I thought, wow, here's this lady, she's 94, and she's reminding me it's good to be alive. And so often we forget that, because between the good and the bad, we're troubled with so many things. But I'd just like to leave you with that thought. It's good to be alive. Thank you.